I can't think of a more qualified and capable individual than Mr. Jon Huntsman to speak to us today. Considering with his history as former U.S. ambassadors to Singapore, China, and Russia, and then also the governor of Utah, he's going to talk today about the economy in Utah in correlation to the rest of the United States and even the whole world. I'm also excited to introduce Sami Ahmed, who will be our moderator for today's discussion. My friend and roommate actually moved from Ethiopia to the United States when he was 11 years old, and he has some valuable perspectives to add. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Sami and Mr. Huntsman.
All right. You can hear me. Well, we're excited to have you here today. Thanks for coming. I'm sure most of us students, we don't get to see a lot of the Huntsman family, which the school is named after, visiting us often. So we're very happy that you took your time from your busy schedule and you could join us.
Thanks, Sam. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me. And I want to thank all of you for coming out. I want to engage you in a discussion about your future, about the future of a state we love, and a little bit about the complex and confusing world in which we reside, or anything else you want to talk about. Because I'm just delighted to be here with the great dean, Dave Patel. Thank you for being here, my friend. My brother David is here, who's our campaign chair. We'll talk about that later. Dave Jr. is here. Sarah Jane is here. When do you guys get married? That's an awesome thing. So, congrats. Critter is here. Thanks, Critter. Thanks for being here. My buddy I met in the gas station this morning, Maverick. Good to see you. I think we picked up 4 votes in Maverick this morning. That was great. And the Cox crew is here. Stand up, guys. Nice to have you. Nice to have you. Yeah. What I love about American democracy is that all voices get to be heard. Because I've come from a place called Russia, before that China. You know what they do for gatherings like this? They round you up outside and throw you in prison. No free speech, no input by citizens, no give and take, no choice about your future leaders, no ability for opposition candidates or their surrogates to sit in front in an event. This is great. This should make you fall in love with your system. Because we've got a lot that isn't right and is broken about the United States, but there's a lot that's right. And when you live 5,000 miles away and you get to see the dysfunction in other so-called great powers, it gives you renewed respect for what we have here. It's called freedom, it's called liberty. And it's called every voice being heard, whether you agree, whether you disagree, doesn't matter. You get to be heard. And if you want, you can be crazy enough to actually run for public office, which I've done and which I'm doing again. And most normal people don't wake up in the morning, Sammy, and say, I think I'm going to run for office. I think I'm going to run for governor. That's just not a natural, normal thought for most people, because it's a little bit like bungee jumping. Or it's a little bit like on a motor, yeah, I'm a former motocross racer. Motorcycles? Anybody do motorcycles here? Okay, you know the tabletops? You launch and you're in the air and you darn well better hit it right or else. Something happens. And you're in suspended animation a little bit because it is a crazy thing to do. And then you find there are a lot of great people, a lot of great men and women, young and old, who care about the future of this state. Some were born here, some were raised here. Some, like Sammy, came here from other countries. Some came from other states. A whole lot have come from other states. And I'm convinced, and we can talk about this in a minute, that we have a very unique opportunity in this state to become something special. We can't look to the past, we got to look to the future. But we have to be informed by what we have learned from the past, what works and what doesn't, and make sure that we can properly reboot ourselves as we proceed to make sure that we can ensure opportunities and freedom for the next generation of Utahns and beyond. So, Sammy, I'm pleased to be here. I'm pleased to be with you, and your story is unbelievable. So thank you for being here. And one and all, thank you for taking the time to be with me. It really is gratifying. And let me just say before we turn it back to Sammy, I can't be here without thinking about my old man, because I had my last conversation with him from Moscow. And I told him I would see him before he died. And it was probably the hardest conversation I had, because I knew that he was going fast. And I also knew that there were other people on the phone. It wasn't a private conversation. And I promised him I'd get back to see him before he passed, and flew here from Moscow as fast as I could, and was 10 minutes away from his home when I got a call from my brother that he died. And that was that. And so part of what I'm doing is, Huntsman's like combat. We like combat. We may win, we may lose. I've got 2 boys out deployed in the military doing their thing. The thing we won't choose to do is stand on the sidelines and watch the world go by, and neither should you. So my clarion call to you students, get engaged. You want to wear a cock shirt? Wear a cock shirt. That's great. You want to wear a Huntsman shirt? Wear a Huntsman shirt. Whatever it is you want. What is unacceptable is to do nothing. Not vote, not participate, because this country and the state will only be as good as the people who step up and do their thing like generations before have. So you can forget everything else I'm going to say here today, but I want you to remember that you have an individual obligation to your state and your nation to step up and participate in this great system of democracy in our republic. So, Sammy, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
No problem. Thanks for having your thoughts there. I just have to make sure, since I guess you have a high opinion of me, you can't talk to any of my friends, just in case that changes. So we're very happy.
It's like an open invitation to me.
Before we get into some of the more of serious nature questions, I have one question for you. It's more of a personal one.
Yeah.
So I saw you play in a rock band, and I saw you playing, I think, with a Russian band while you were an ambassador to Russia. So can you tell me more about that? Are you a rocker? What's your favorite band?
This is not fair at all. Because I was a rock musician in the 70s, so as such, you don't remember a whole lot about that. So I was down in St. George on Friday. We launched our campaign in Cedar City, and then went on to St. George, and I told the group that I spoke to there, and we met with a bunch of folks. It was great. One of my first visits to St. George was with my band, 1977, 78, before you were born. And we played in one of the honky-tonk places up in the north end of Main Street. And I said it was great, but I don't remember a whole lot of that visit. But it was, so everyone has dreams in life. My earliest dream was to become a musician. If I could wave a magic wand, I'd still be a rock musician, but I didn't cut it. I didn't make the cut. So you gotta pursue other things, and but I did it initially just to earn a little money in school, and I played piano for different bands, and I loved it. And my last gig was on the David Letterman show, where remember David Letterman? He was on late at night, and he was great. And Paul Schieffer, who is a great musician himself, asked after I did an interview, "You want to play with the band?" And I said, "Geez, of course. You know, it doesn't get much better than this, playing with the CBS orchestra." So played with Paul Schieffer. We did our thing, and after that, I thought, time to retire. Time to retire as a musician. You know, life doesn't get much better than this. But I did play with a couple of bands in Russia, just to throw them off a little bit, just to have them think. Because I was followed in Russia by, you know, like you guys here in the yellow shirts. You know, I was followed by security guys and and FSB people, you know, who are always keeping tabs on you, taking pictures and listening to everything you say so they can embarrass you if they need to. And I'm sure when I went on the stage and played with the band that they were freaking out. I don't think they'd had an ambassador ever done that before. But,
no, right up thing.
But I do that because everyone has to hold on to dreams, even if it's still to become a great musician, which I will never be.
Well, I wish I could have a similar talent, but I have to do well in school in order to succeed. So, just I guess changing gears a little, I've had many opportunities with the Huntsman School to travel to many different places around the world and different countries. And I recently had an opportunity to travel to Singapore. And I was just amazed with how well the country is run. Their government is really focused on efficiency. And I am aware that you were the former ambassador to Singapore. So what was your experience like there? What was the culture? How were the people? How's your interactions with the government, the economy?
I'll tell you what I learned from Singapore that I applied here, and that is still being applied. So you can't live in Singapore, which, we think we compete against Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, California. We're competing against nation states today. We're competing against Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, and beyond. It's a global marketplace. And you all are going to find that out when you go interview in the job market and let loose your talents. You're going to find that it is a global marketplace. We've got to be prepared for that. It's one of the reasons that I launched as governor a language immersion program, which is now the country's largest. And we chose Chinese. Why Chinese? I'm a Chinese speaker, but I also understood that our greatest competition for as far as the eye can see into the future is going to be China. And what great gift to give kids getting out of a public school than knowledge of a language that is going to be a part of their world? What a great gift. And so we did that, and we started small and scaled up, and today it's the leader in the country, and other states are trying to do the same thing. In fact, the language immersion 8th annual seminar will be here in Salt Lake next year, and I look forward to joining them and keynoting that program. But what I learned in Singapore is here was a little country, less than 5 million people, no natural resources, zero. No oil, no gas, no agriculture, surrounded by a sea of hostile nations trying to eat their lunch. And the leadership in Singapore, which is a heterogeneous country, so they got majority Chinese, but they've got Indians and Malays too. How do we survive in this world? Well, they decided in 1965 to throw open their doors. Everything that the developing world at the time wasn't doing. Back then, the key to success was subsidize your domestic industries and goose it all the way to success. Build up walls and barriers. The Singaporeans did just the opposite. They dropped barriers. They opened themselves up to foreign investment and international trade. And it launched them in a way that was absolutely remarkable. And they're the one country in the world that has done this better than anybody else. They've kept their eye on what a country needs to do to stay relevant and competitive. And for them, it has been taxes, incentives, educational systems, technical training, certification, polytechnics, they call them. And after I served there as ambassador, I was asked to be on their economic development board. And this is in the late 90s, and I thought, whoa, this will be a front row seat. It was just a small group, maybe 12 of us. A front row seat on how the most competitive nation on earth makes it happen. And I learned a lot serving on the EDB board, Economic Development Board. And when I ran for governor, I put together a 10-point plan back in '04. And back then, the big issue was we were lacking economic vitality. How do we get on our feet? And how do we move forward? And I wanted very much to take the lessons of the EDB and apply them here locally. So I created an organization called GOED, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, which is still around today. And we had an old Department of Commerce that was doing this stuff, and it just was too big and bureaucratic. I thought we need something that is part of the governor's office that takes responsibility for the wins and the losses. And ultimately, the governor is the key driver of economic development. And so I took that EDB model and applied it here after I was elected in '04. And I went back to the Singaporeans at one point and I said, sorry about stealing your intellectual property, but we're putting it to use in Utah. And it's doing us a lot of good. So if you wonder where the GOED model came from in this state, think Singapore. Think a governor who had been inspired by the best of the best in the world, who was able to apply those competitiveness principles in making it happen. It's still around. Go Ed. I mean, we started that, still around. But part of the 10-point plan back then was to rebrand the state. Life Elevated made that happen. Part of what we were hearing at the time was the tax code is not competitive. We delivered the biggest tax reform package in recent history. Hadn't changed since. And guess what? It was a unanimous vote in the legislature. Democrats and Republicans, every one of them. We got a flat tax, just under 5%. We double weighted the business tax. We did some other things that really made this place competitive. And we came up with an incentives program, headquarters program, industry clustering that you have benefited from in Cache Valley. And so all of that, the seeds were planted with that 10-point plan that we worked very hard on. I went around toward the end of '04, and I said, we had a great team put it together. If you vote for me, you're voting for this 10-point plan, just so you know for a certainty what it is you're voting for. So you better understand what this is. And we got every one of those 10-point plans, every one of the 10 points implemented in a few short years. Never thought we could do it, but we did. And it was a great down payment in creating the framework for growth. Still in place today, all the stuff that we started. And Herbert has built on it, done a nice job. It takes generation after generation to make these things work. It's a long-term play. Governors don't work on short-term things. It's all long-term. You're paid to look around the bend and to see what your risk profile is and what ultimately might hurt your population. That's what governors are paid to do. And part of that risk profile is, okay, what do you need to survive? Never changes. I mean, states are always worried about this year in and year out. How do you pay the bills? How do you pay for education? How do you pay for roads in the fastest growing state in America? So there's only one way to answer that. You got to have a vibrant, dynamic economy to be able to do that. So that was job number one for us. And it was a pleasure to be able to do that. And the Singapore example is something that inspired me enormously early on. And it was also a reminder that we are not alone. We just don't compete against ourselves. This is a competitive global marketplace. And you better believe the states around us, and even countries, want to take our jobs. They want to take our investment. They want it in their country. So as far as the eye can see, this is a fight that we're going to have to wage. And you're going to feel it when you get out in the marketplace. You're going to see how intense the competition is. They're getting better at it, and so must we.
Okay. Thank you. I guess a follow-up question on that. Because Singapore is such a small country with a few million people, do you think their, I guess, rapid economic growth is replicable in places like the United States, where we have a larger population and their government is run from more of an authoritarian one system version?
Yeah,
what are some things we can
It's a good point. Is it applicable to the United States at the federal level? No. Is it applicable to states? Absolutely it is. So when we got the 10-point plan going, I can't tell you how many governors who were running for governor came and said, I want to copy the 10-point plan. What do we do? Well, it's not that easy to put it together, and not all states can do that. But if you want, listen, every governor is looking to the best models around the country for economic development, education, transportation, everything else. And they're trying to rip each other off. That's what you do. You try to steal ideas that are out there somewhere else and make them even better. It's a highly competitive marketplace. You think the Maine governor is in a competitive place, position to have? Totally competitive. So I think the Singaporean model, which is being looked at by a lot of countries in the world, mostly small to medium-sized countries, a lot of countries in the Gulf, for example, UAE, Bahrain, even the Saudis are looking at how they can learn from what the Singaporeans have done. So yeah, good models stand the test of time, and they're always going to be emulated by somebody else, and then somebody else and somebody else. Increasingly, we're going to have to say we can't rely on DC to get things done, even on Medicaid, although that'll still be a part of covering some portion of our uninsured. And because of the dysfunction in the world, quite frankly, so the bloom is coming off the rose with Chinese growth. We rely on China a whole lot. You know how many people export from this state to China? How many agricultural exporters we have? Alfalfa and beyond? There's a lot. The bloom is coming off that rose, and so we're going to have to say, we got to solve problems on our own here. We got to begin to create models that are uniquely our own. We just can't rely on the world and the nation to do it for us. But you know what? That's a little daunting and challenging, but it's also very, very exciting that we can come up with models that will be really important, not only for us, but for the rest of the nation that they can learn from.
All right. Thank you. Switching gears a little bit, most of us here are, 20 in our 20s, and when I
kind of looks like that.
well, some of us here in our 20s, I guess.
Doug, not you. Sorry.
I remember when I was younger, when I was about 18 years old, my uncle once told me, in life there are many opportunity windows that open up, and it's my responsibility to take that opportunity. And if I don't, there will be none like it again. Some might be similar, but none like it. None like the one that just passed. So for you, as someone who's very successful, and you have taken many opportunities to get to where you are and to help our nation and the people around you, my question would be, how do you tell the difference between an opportunity and a risk? Because that's what most of us are asking ourselves, especially as we're ready to make big decisions in our lives. We have to decipher between a risky endeavor and a great opportunity. So what does that look like to you, and how do you know the difference?
Well, far be it for me to give you any advice. Let me just say that opportunity is risk. There is no opportunity without risk. And all of you will be facing decisions in your professional lives. And first of all, success is kind of the crossroads of experience and opportunity. It's when experience meets opportunity. And you know it when it arrives. You do. Mm-hmm. And then there's going to be an element of risk. And that's, do I do this? Here's the downside. Here's the upside. My encouragement to you would be to take a risk. Think big. Go large. Make it happen. Because without risk, there's no real reward. And you can play it safe, which some people will want to do, but you're getting a great education here. You've got a great springboard. You've got the whole world ahead of you. Take a risk. And but you know the opportunity is right because you feel it in your soul, you feel it in your head. It's part of your passion. And the thing that, I guess I'm old enough now to be able to say this, the thing that is a heartbreak for me is when you find someone who hasn't found their passion and they're advanced in life and they're just kind of drifting. And they didn't, at your ages, find their sweet spot, because every one of you is a genius in some way. Every one of you has something that's totally unique that only you can do. The genius inside. And when you find it, it's a beautiful thing. Some people don't until much later. So I would say that when it comes to risk and finding opportunity and making those decisions in life, find your sweet spot first. What am I good at? What am I uniquely a genius at doing? And then find an opportunity that matches that. Because they're out there. You'll find plenty of opportunities given the education that you're receiving here. But don't shy away from risk. It scares some people. I mean, the thought that you run for governor or something, I say it's like bungee jumping. Yeah, the minute after you announce, the hate comes in. Hate speak. And it's like, well, why this? Why do we do this? Why do we talk about other people like this? But it's all part of the risk profile. You know that you're going to be hit, you're going to be nailed, you're going to be caricatured as somebody or not. That's all part of what politicians do. I'm not much of a politician, so I can't do that. I'm a public servant, and that's what I'll always be. And if being a public servant is good enough, then people won't vote for me. It's pretty simple. But take risks. You might fail, but my old man had a great saying early in life, because Huntsman Corporation failed repeatedly. People don't remember that part. It would come very close to disaster on occasion. A lot of bankers who say, we're not going to fund it. You guys are going to collapse. You guys are going bankrupt. In the interview process, he would always insist, and David remembers this, on asking essentially the first question, tell me where you failed and what you've done about it. And if someone said that they never failed in life, no job. You failed, even big time, and you found a way forward, you got a job. Because failure is, in a sense, the greatest, most essential element of learning. Heaven forbid people who have not failed and haven't learned how to deal and cope with failure.
Thank you. So the message is we need to get out there and fail so we can succeed. Is that correct?
Before you succeed. Because if you succeed first, you're going to fail later on at some point. It's just part of the cycles of life.
Perfect. Well, so I'm graduating this year, and I'm looking for, I guess, career opportunities. And with Utah being one of the rapidly growing states in the country, what's your outlook on Utah's economy and growth moving forward?
Well, Utah's experienced unbelievable growth, and that's good, and that's a tribute to the private sector. We got a lot of great entrepreneurs. I was just down with a bunch of them in Lehigh, in the so-called Silicon Slopes area. And to hear them talk about what they've done, so part of our clusters program with the 10-point plan was technology, it was materials and composites, aerospace design and engineering, biotechnology, so on and so forth. And I told them I used to race my motorcycle in Lehigh, where there was nothing. And you go there today and it's a mini Silicon Valley. I wish we had more Silicon Slopes equivalents around the state, and that should be one of our goals at some point, is to spread out some of this growth and opportunity. And to hear them talk about, you know, the road ahead and where they're placing their bets and what they want in the state going forward, what they want in their workforce, more diversity in the STEM pipeline, they're not seeing it. LGBT support, they want that too. They want clean air. You have air problems here. And guess what? The air is seeping all the way down into Utah County. And there's some days where they can't even bring people in to interview them, to hire them, because they don't want them stuck in the gunk for fear that they won't leave wherever they're trying to recruit them from. So we have unlimited potential in the state. One of the few things we've got. Our books are balanced, which is great. We have AAA rating and have for a very, very long time. That's great. Educational system is producing good kids. We've got the best institutions of higher learning. All of those are important. Now the key for us will be, how do we keep brain power in the state? So one of my biggest gripes back in '04 when we ran was we were educating our kids, paying for it, loving them, and then they would leave to go to Colorado or to California or Nevada or Singapore, wherever, because we didn't have enough opportunities here. We have a lot more in the way of opportunities now. But we still have brain drain, though. That's the problem. How do we keep our young kids in the state to apply their risk and their genius to this state for the next generation of growth? And how, over time, do we connect the rural and the urban populations so that we don't have a severe disconnect between the producers and the consumers? That worries me, too. So there's a lot that can be done. I think we're poised for growth and a lot more in the way of opportunity. But it's going to take a rebooting. It's going to take a 2.0. So I've said we did the 10-point plan before. I think we benefited from it. It's time for a 2.0. It's time for a 10-point plan 2.0 that really does capture the essence of what our growth engines will be. Some will be the same, but listen, we can now afford to take other than just call centers and just basic manufacturing. We can take upscale, value-added, technologically detailed manufacturing right here in the state as well as anybody. And that means we're going to have a workforce, some 4-year trained, some 2-year trained, that can get the job done. And we're going to have some work to do there. But part of all of this, and I think the one thing that really compels me in this race, is where economic vitality was the key in '04. Right now, it's growth. And how we're going to be able to maintain our unparalleled quality of life, all the while shoehorning another 1 million people into the state. Where do we put them? Now, you see we got a lot of land around. Well, guess what? A lot of that land isn't developable. You know how much land Salt Lake Valley has left that isn't already spoken for? 40,000 acres. Now, there may be 3 or 4 times that in Utah County, which is where a lot of the growth is being pushed. But when you look at the 10-county Wasatch front and back area, you know, it's experiencing a lot of the pressures of growth. Air, water, quality of life. So how is it that we get through the next few years, which will make the decisions for the next 25 to 50 years, that will allow us to maintain a quality of life, all the while being able to keep our brain power here, attract additional brain power, and develop the industries of tomorrow, and keep us as competitive as we can be. I think the whole growth discussion and what we do about it is as important as economic development itself. I think they're tied. I used to chair a group back in the 90s called Envision Utah. It was the first attempt at trying to educate people on our population growth and what to do about it. I was kicked out of a lot of offices, mayor's offices and others, who didn't want to plan, didn't want to look at the future. We're going to keep what we have. We're going to keep, you know, the farm and the ranch, which is great when you can afford to do it. But along the Wasatch Front, which is one of the most densely populated corridors in the country, we're an urban state when you start looking at our density patterns along the greater Wasatch Front, and now in Washington County and Iron County where it's spilling over. And we went around talking about, as you add a million here, a million there, here's the impact it has on the land that we have to develop, which isn't a whole lot. And therefore, the impact on our quality of life. Well, I'm glad to see that from the 90s through to where we are today, the awareness level in almost every corner of our state is way up in terms of the need to look around the bend as it relates to the options we have for growth. We can't just let it happen. Because if we do, we become a Maricopa County. Anybody here from Maricopa County? It's a great place, but they've grown well beyond their ability to accommodate the growth. Anybody here from Clark County? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Anybody here from LA County originally? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about too. So the key here is, how do we stay ahead of the growth curve as opposed to behind? The minute we fall behind the growth curve, you never catch up. So I do believe that all the issues related to growth, air, water, economy, education, are going to be the most compelling issue over the next few years.
So, with a man who's got many opportunities and has traveled around the world, what keeps bringing you back to Utah? Why not take other opportunities?
Well, it's not what keeps bringing me back to Utah, it's what takes me abroad sometimes. And that's sometimes somebody asking you to serve. But this is, listen, I grew up in California because our families left Idaho and Utah, both sides of my family, to go seek opportunity in California. So my parents met in California. My grandfather, Huntsman, retired from being a principal at Los Altos High School in the Bay Area. My other grandfather ran the hardware store in Palo Alto, where I was born. And they went there because there wasn't enough opportunity here. So they went to California, the Golden State. Now everybody's coming from the Golden State here. It's kind of the migration patterns in reverse. And we go back generations. This is a home. Sometimes we've been kicked out of places. The Huntsmans were kicked out probably of Fillmore a time or two for being rebels and reprobates. But that's okay. It's an interesting family line. But this is going to be home for a very long time for us. We're deeply invested in the state. David, my brother, is president of a foundation. So we decided long ago that if our company worked, we'd put everything in a foundation and just dedicate it to the state. Most of it anyway, because you have to. And that's what we're going to be focused on for generations, as far as the eye can see. So this is a special place. This is where ancestors worked hard and toiled hard. And it's also where a lot of people have gone off to serve, like my sons. They're asked, they volunteer, people in uniform, people doing religious work, people doing diplomatic work, people doing intelligence work. The state is full of people who answer the call to service. How do I know that? Because every embassy I've operated, I've seen some of our greatest officers from this state. And they're doing incredible work. And then they come back. And sometimes they go out again, depending upon, you know, what their level of commitment to service. So that's been part of our life. And you don't often plan that. But I've always believed that when you're asked by the president, I don't care what party, my boys don't have the luxury of saying before they deploy, what party is my president? And then I think I'll go. That's not how we roll in this country. We roll up our sleeves and we go to serve. And some, you might agree with your president, you might disagree. I've never worked for a president who I totally agreed with, never. Never will. That's an impossibility. As they say, you know, if you agree with me 7 out of 12 times, come join our cause. If you agree with me 12 out of 12 times, go see a psychiatrist. So service for us has always been a core value, and it's now in our family. You know, or my kids do it too. And I hope when they come back from their service that they're not criticized for serving abroad, helping their country. That's not an American value, to criticize people for service. That's what we do. Then you try to apply anything you've learned to making your state better. And that's what we're in it for.
Perfect. Thank you so much for answering some of the questions that I have, but I want to open it up to the audience for anyone who's got questions for Jon Huntsman. So there'll be mics coming around.
Perfect. Yeah,
Yes,
I'll
sir.
go ahead and ask our first question. John, thank you so much for being here.
Delighted.
One of our key principles or pillars here at the Jon Huntsman School of Business is ethical leadership. You've had the opportunity to work with a lot of leaders all over the world. What are some of the key characteristics of an ethical leader, and what impact does that have on the individuals that they lead?
Well, an ethical leader, and far be it for me to stand as any kind of pillar or icon, or anybody else for that matter, because an ethical leader generally will be identified over time, over a course of his or her service. It boils down to this. You have key values that drive what you do, and you hold to them. And your handshake essentially is your bond. So that, in a nutshell, is where ethical leadership resides. Your word is your bond. Your word and your actions are driven by core values that you just picked up by parents, relatives, education, experience, that drives you in your professional life, and that you're an extension of those values, and that you hold true to your commitments, what you say, in the professional realm. And people who are part of your work team will see that, and they'll recognize you for it. So there's lots of good books on ethical leadership. Some were written 2,000 years ago. Some were written hundreds of years ago. Some are written today. But reflect on all that literature, because the ideals of ethics have been around since the Greek philosophers, maybe even earlier than that. And it all comes down to the value set that you adopt and you hold near and dear, and how you choose to implement that as a leader. Thank you. Yes. Sure.
Well, I see you like a Teddy Roosevelt. And that's a pretty high compliment, because he had really good ethics. And he also grew up in a family where, because they had significant resources, he was shaped like a diamond. Very hard, very strong, very capable. So I wanted to say that. But here's my question. What are the one or two most important things Utah needs to focus on to be that competitive leader in the next 20 years?
I love Teddy Roosevelt. Thank you for saying that. Teddy Roosevelt came here in 1902 in the state. He had taken over, you know your history, he had taken over from William McKinley, who had been assassinated by the anarchist in upstate New York. He had been president for a very short period of time. And thereupon, Roosevelt went from vice president to president. Young man, the youngest in our history, 44 years old. He had been a mayor, he'd been a police chief, he'd been the assistant secretary of the Navy, he'd been around, and he was a rebel rouser, no doubt about that. But he is also responsible for what I love out in this part of the country, our national parks. And he went around the western part of the United States primarily, and he said, this land is too beautiful. Hold on to it. Let's create a national park service and put them in our inventory. And he started doing that. And he came here, I believe it was in 1902, because in the governor's mansion there's a great gift that he left behind when he stayed there at the Kern's mansion. And he rallied the troops in the center of Salt Lake City. And he thanked Utahns for being good conservationists. I look back on that and I think, wow, That's pretty amazing. We've always been known for being good conservationists. And just to drive home the point, Teddy Roosevelt, when he was through town, basically used that opportunity to drive that home. What will be important? Keeping good people here. Keeping good people here will be an outgrowth of strong communities, strong schools, an educational system that really does recognize the highly competitive world in which we live and are preparing kids for that reality. So education is going to be critical in order to keep our schools strong. We got to do something about our teachers. Because do you realize we have about 40 to 45% turnover after 5 years? 2.5 times the national average. 2.5 times the national average. Why? Maybe a lot of reasons, but I think part of it is compensation. I really do. So let's do something that brings people in and allows them to stay in the fold if that's what they want to do. Envision Utah has done a really interesting study on this if you want to take a look at it in terms of identifying a starting salary. So that would be an important thing to do. I think maintaining good and vibrant universities, higher education, not just 4-year, but we also need more certificate granting opportunities for people who don't want a 4-year degree, people who want a 2-year degree, or a 1.5 years that allows them to go right into the workplace. But maintaining our competitiveness will be part education, but also part the environment. So you learn pretty quickly in the marketplace, globally, anywhere. Capital is a coward. Money, it's a coward. It will flee risk wherever it sees it, and it will park itself somewhere else in a safe haven. So why does money not go to Russia? It's not a safe haven. Too much risk. Nobody knows what's around the bend in Russia, and nobody trusts it. So why does money go to Singapore? South Korea? It's a safe haven. So say whatever you want about economic policy, state or national. The job is to become a safe haven for capital. And if you can have the environment that attracts capital, and if it comes in, it will prime the pump for everything else you need from an economic development standpoint. If you are deemed as being a risky destination, and I think we have been in the past, it will flee to go to some surrounding marketplace, because capital is going to park somewhere. That's just the nature of free-flowing capital. The goal here is to match the opportunity of our young people as they're educated and as they dream big with the right kind of investment and opportunities that land here in the state that will allow people to stay here. If we can get those couple of things right, it'll be a home run. No question. That's exactly what we worked on in 2004 with the whole 10-point plan. It's how you capture brain power and how you make yourself a safe haven for capital. Not that complicated. Now, implementing it is really tough because you got to do things like tax reform. Because capital will first seek out a state's tax policy. And if it's high, if it's burdensome, if it's regulatory rich, it's going to flee and go somewhere else. So one of the first things we did was to reform the tax code. It took us 2 years, but we got it done. Still the same tax code as we got done. And that was, I think, hugely instrumental in attracting capital. So that recipe, that formula won't change a whole lot going forward. Thank you for that. Yes, ma'am. Tell me your name and where you're from.
My name is Sarah Dent Merrill. I'm from West Jordan, Utah.
Thank you.
I currently act as business senator here for the college. And one of my jobs is to improve the academic excellence here within the Jon Huntsman School of Business. And in this college, I've seen that excellence, thanks in part to your huge donation, continuous donations to this college. But I see a huge disconnect, like you had mentioned previously, between higher education and the high schools and middle schools around here. So I was wondering, other than offering higher pay to teachers, what other plans do you have in place to improve the academic excellence in the state as a whole?
Well, that's a big and complicated question. And it's stuff I've worked on before and that a lot of people have worked on. And you have to look at the different the different rungs of education in the state, because we have public ed, which is where a lot of our budget goes and will for a very long time. And then we have our higher ed and our vocational training facilities as well. And you have to look at all of them a little bit differently. But so public ed. So I love public ed because there's so much there that can be worked on. And for any classroom to work, you got to have a good teacher. My grandfather was a teacher, Grandpa Huntsman. My dad's dead. He didn't call himself a teacher. He was a high school music teacher. He was an educator, the top of the top. So my dad didn't become an educator. He went into business. And I don't think my grandpa ever forgave him for that because he wasn't good enough to be an educator. His other two brothers became educators. So a teacher is where it begins. We need 3,000 a year to keep the system going. So let's get smart about how we encourage and incentivize even some of you sitting in this room to go into education, become a teacher. So I think that's important. So for what we're spending from a WPU standpoint, a weighted pupil unit, which is a measure of economics that we give per student, I think we can do a better job in understanding where the dollars go and how they're being spent and what the return is. We haven't done that analysis. And if you ask the school board, sometimes they don't know. So go into math, go into science, go into whatever, per dollar. I think the taxpayers deserve to know what kind of return they're getting on that invested dollar. So we know if the WPU is high, if it's low, if it's about right. We have these debates all the time about education getting enough money or it's getting too much money. We'll see the data. Let's see the data. Let's see exactly what we're spending and what we're getting for it. And that would be a very good exercise in determining then our use of proceeds, our use of investment. And then there are lots of different things we can do in terms of STEM education, because I think the state over time will need a whole lot more in the way of STEM training. So what do you hear in Lehigh? Our mini Silicon Valley? More STEM, bring it on. A more diverse pipeline of STEM students, which we need to work on as well. So I think that presents some great opportunities. Language learning, I think, is another one that we invested a lot in and created a national program where I think we can continue to do more, because it is, you know, a big, complicated marketplace, and giving kids a head start I think is really, really important. But I'm proud of our teachers. We've got a lot of great teachers in the state. We really do. And they do a lot with limited resources, and we expect teachers to do everything from mental health right on through to advanced mathematics. And sometimes they're the gym teacher as well in some of our rural communities. So that takes me, if I can, Sammy, I just have one more thing. I know we're running. So aside from schools and we can go on all day about things that I think would be good, it helps to have been governor because you've been close to these issues. You've fought for the issues that you think are important. You've tried to fund them. You've gone out to every school district and a lot of schools. You've seen what works now after the fact, because a lot of things take 10, 20 years to germinate and come to fruition. And so it's really interesting to see what worked and what didn't. But let me talk about another issue that I want to talk about going forward. I might win, I might lose. I don't much care. But I want to talk about some of these issues. Mental health. The largest killer in this state for kids between 18 and 24. Anyone between 18 and 24? Yep, that's what I thought. Suicide. Why? That didn't happen when I was in school. Basically unheard of. Now we've got every family, neighbors, you know, I don't have to go down the list. We all know somebody, and in some cases very close to us, who took their life. Why? We've had a collective failure in the state. You can call it whatever you want. We've had a collective failure. We're not talking about it enough. Why? Because it's too hard to talk about. Politicians can't find the language. We give $1 million here, $1 million there, a little program. We're scratching the surface. We're treating the symptoms. Well, can the governor do something about it? I don't know, but we darn well better try to do more. The governor can convene all the stakeholders. And by the way, this is, my sons in the Navy would say, this is an all-hands-on-deck effort. It's religion, it's state and local government, it's foundations, it's volunteers, everybody. We've got to stand up and talk about this and bring an end to it. Because I'll be darned if we're going to let this statistic continue to be a headline. #1 killer. Innocent and precious and beautiful lives gone for reasons that you all know, you're all familiar with. So we're going to do something about that. I don't know if we're going to come up with an instant formula that cures everything. That's impossible, but you can begin to do something more. And I want to begin to do something more. And it isn't a Republican, it isn't a Democrat, it isn't an independent issue. This is a Utah issue. This is what we ought to be talking about. So that's something else that I want to infuse into this whole discussion, which isn't education related, but it is. Because you know what the anxiety level is for you kids on campus here? Have you read the statistics? How many of you suffer from anxiety? Yeah. It's a high, high percentage. And that can sometimes lead to other things. And drug abuse is one of them. So anyway, people say, well, gee, you know, the state's big and it's different and it's growing up and all that. Let me tell you something. The state's no different from when I ran it. We just have 1 million more people. And we have bigger challenges that have to be worked on. But the basics are always going to be here. And we're always going to have to be mindful of them. But our people will come first. And we're going to see if we can do something about that statistic.
Thank you. I think we have room for one more question.
Yes, sir, right back here. Space Force. Does that mean you are a, what? So what compels you to wear that shirt? Tell me who you are, where you're from first.
My name is Colin. I'm from Torrance, California, born and raised.
Yep.
I just like it because it's just a good, I saw it on Amazon and I just asked for it for a birthday gift.
Nice. that is so your generation. I saw it on Amazon and just bought it. We wonder why our tax code is eroding in this state. I just saw it on Amazon.
I'll probably be moving to Texas though, because my wife's from there and there's a lot of jobs there. That probably is why I'm leaving from Utah when I graduate. Ultimately, my 2 questions are, and I feel that you're perfectly qualified to answer. Number 1 is, it feels like Putin has been in power since Gorbachev. You know, he's been in power my whole life. So I'm really wondering, do you think he'll ever leave willingly? And 2, do you kind of feel that the Cold War is still going on? And also, this one will ruffle a couple feathers, but in terms of the current impeachment inquiry, do you feel that it's mainly a policy and hearsay issue, or do you think it's something that's actually been illegal that has happened?
Well, impeachment first, and thank you for that. Another Californian traipsing through our state. Right on, right on. You know, the Judiciary Committee in the House has a responsibility when they sense that there is evidence, and so they collect the evidence and they do their thing. I really worry about these things becoming hyper-politicized, which is all we see wall-to-wall cable TV. That's why I don't watch TV anymore, except for some of my favorite programs that have nothing to do with news. My answer would be, well, we have a national election in less than a year. Our country's most powerful weapon is the ballot box. Why don't we just vote and let the vote kind of carry it, unless there was illegality of some high level that would be established as you bring all the evidence forward, which has to happen. We ought to see all the evidence. It all ought to be brought forward. And these people who we've heard from, you know, in the last week or two are all my friends. All these folks who have been paraded through to give their testimony. I know them all. I've worked with them all in the trenches. And they're good public servants. And they represent intelligence, defense, diplomacy. And you'll see more of that. So it's important that they come forward and say whatever they have to say. But I would love a situation where the American people can be informed. Open up the hearings. Let us be informed, and let us take it all the way to the ballot box. And let's kind of do it the old-fashioned way. I think that would be good. My fear is that you get into a tit for tat. So you did it to our president. On day one, we're going to do it to your president. And that's where we go, in a highly divided, polarized country, which is horrible. We just start impeaching each other on day one. That's not what you want, ultimately. That is serious dysfunction. So that's my take on that one. Putin. So, you know, it's fun being in politics here because I'm used to dealing with the Putin brigade, people who will put a nuclear weapon where the sun doesn't shine. And you get used to working with real thugs because it's part of what the system is. And Putin has risen to power based upon a singular model of fear, intimidation, controlling the wealth, which are the former state-owned enterprises. Listen, Russia is a gas station with nuclear weapons. It's gas and oil. That's what keeps it going. And a few weapon systems on top of that that they sell to countries. And he's been able to singularly occupy his position for 20 years. So Yeltsin took over after Gorbachev, after 1991, when the Soviet Union died and the Russian Federation was born. And Putin, out of nowhere, nobody knew who Putin was. Why did he take over Boris Yeltsin? Because Boris Yeltsin, same thing that Xi Jinping will need in China, the same thing that Wen Jiabao needed, the same thing that Jiang Zemin needed, the same thing Deng Xiaoping needed. You always need somebody who can protect you and your family and your ill-gotten gains from the next administration. And so Putin will ultimately have to find his own Putin. So here's what he's up against. He's up against 2024. When constitutionally he's out. He can't run again. Will he create a super powerful National Security Council that he chairs that kind of keeps him going? That's going to be really complicated because the polls today, and I'll bet you all aren't following the polls on Putin. He was reelected March of 2018 at about 85%. Pretty good. If you're a dictator, I guess it's pretty standard. Today, he is probably 20 to 30 points below that. So when the body bags come home from Syria and from Libya, this is a big political negative for him. When the economy grows at 1%, which is what it's doing, that's a huge negative. When the country looks increasingly authoritarian and people, particularly the younger emerging generation, don't feel that they get a say in the affairs of their state, that becomes problematic. And that's kind of where the whole thing is going. So where he goes, you know, will in large part determine the choices that are made before 2024. Will he find somebody to take his place? Who will that be? Will they be able to hold the established order together, which are basically a lot of oligarchs, and they've got a system of spoils. You pay them off to keep them happy and to maintain stability. That's how the system works. It's a system of spoils. Meanwhile, people are shut out. Nobody has a say in what goes on. But I think, you know, where the Chinese have a sustainable model longer term, strong party, strong government, strong economy, $20 trillion in size, the Russians don't have any of that. They have an economy that's the size of the state of Texas, $1.5 trillion. They have people fleeing. Remember we talked about brain power a minute ago, capturing brain power? Their brain power is leaving. And their brain power is leaving with cash, capital. So the two things you don't want to see flee your marketplace, brain power and capital. That's what's happening. So if you were to look at the dashboard indicators of Russia, you'd say this is a serious problem. What do we do about it? So long-term political instability, who takes the place of Putin, what are the events that surround all of that? The reason I'd be concerned is where, again, the Chinese are stable, the Russians are entering a period of possible instability, and it could be serious instability. And the challenge there is they have as many nuclear weapons as we do, about 4,500. And they have the ability to fire those weapons with great accuracy, just as we do, from submarines, from land, from mobile launchers, launch them from planes. And when you've got all of that firepower in a very unstable political system, that's a horrible combination. And so from a global stability standpoint, I'd be a little worried about that. So anyway, we could go on and on and on, but I'll leave it at that. And Sammy, I'll thank you. I know that our time is up. But listen, thank you for coming out. Get involved in the affairs of your community. Get involved in the affairs of your state. The only thing that you will not be forgiven for is standing on the sidelines and choosing not to participate. You want to get involved in our campaign? I'd love to have you. You want to get involved in someone else's campaign? Go for it. The bottom line is get out there, get involved, learn the issues, change the world. Thank you all so very much. It's been a pleasure.